Welcome. Hello, I'm Liz Mail. I'm Executive Chair of LMC. We're a PR, communications and collaborations consultancy. We work purely in the built environment, particularly with the change makers, the innovators in our sector. And I'm really excited to be joined today by exactly one of those innovators. We're talking to Peter Barker, consultant with Ryder Architecture, one of the leading lights in putting together a fantastic initiative called PlanBEE, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome, Peter. Tell me more about you.
Hi, Liz. Great to be here. Just a bit of background on me. I'm working as a consultant at Ryder, but I was formerly a partner in the practice. Joined the practice in the mid 1990s. My earlier career actually started life doing a degree in classics in the early 1980s, before coming out into the economic recession of the early 1980s and finding as a graduate with a humanities degree, I couldn't actually get a job. And there's a lot of that happening these days. So there's, I think, some of the things from my own experience have fed into my outlook on life and the industry as it is now and some potential solutions. But I retrained in the early 1980s. I decided I was intimidated by the potential 7-year duration of doing an architecture degree at that stage when I was a grand old age of 23. So I prompted myself to go in and do a qualification in architectural technology, which I did at Newcastle Polytechnic, now Northumbria University. And I worked in a variety of practices in the northeast of England before joining Ryder in the mid 1990s. Just at a point when Ryder was really questioning its growth as a practice, or its, I suppose, reinvention as a practice, having gone through a very successful early stage of its life as a one of the first multidisciplinary practices in the UK with engineers and architects working under one roof. So I joined the practice at a very exciting point. And I've been in the practice for well over 30 years, before retiring 2025. And because of my enthusiasm, particularly in the latter years, for helping to support new educational programs, I've maintained a role as a consultant, working with the practice and other partners on trying to change for the better the education landscape in the built environment.
Mm. Well, I know we've met many times, and most recently, of course, I know you were supporting the Architects Registration Board, ARB, with some of that work looking at the future education in architecture. Uh, but also, what I really like to talk to you about is Plan B. As I understand it, it's now 10 years old, this initiative. I hadn't appreciated it been going for so long, but it really is quite extraordinary. And the more I talk to you about it, the more I hear about it, the more I think actually there's so much lessons, so many lessons, so much learning that we can take from your experience. Um, Plan B, as I understand it, and effectively described as a sort of higher apprenticeship program covering design, construction, and management, a real multidisciplinary approach to education and built environment, and a fantastic alternative to young people who might not want to go through a some single disciplinary degree, instead can graduate from Plan B. And I know that you launched this initially in the Northeast. As I understand it, it's now active in Manchester, London, probably elsewhere as well. I'd really love to know a little bit more about where did the idea come from, and really sort of tell me about the thinking behind it, and tell me about where Plan B is now.
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing to say is that traditionally, we as a practice and many other architectural practices have obviously recruited from traditional architectural programs, some of which are excellent and fantastic. And we also employ technologists and have had relationships with universities running architectural technology programs. Um, and obviously we have other skills and disciplines within the practice as well, such as landscape and urban design, and increasing interest in digital skills as well. But traditionally, and if you hark back to 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we were recruiting from schools of architecture and universities that delivered architectural technology degrees. However, what we were finding was there was a lot of unevenness in the skill levels and competency, I suppose, of the young people who were joining us, and we were having to spend a lot of time almost backfilling it and supplementing learning to get them up to a basic level um, of competence where they could really enjoy the role and be efficient and capable to serve the practice and the business. Um, so just in discussing this with other peers or other employers in the region, the northeast, we found that there were similar concerns, I suppose, from other disciplines: quantity surveyors, project managers, contractors, building services engineers, structural engineers. We all thought that maybe we can do something different. Maybe we could do something better, where there's an emphasis on truly understanding the interaction of the disciplines, and it sounds obvious, but what the other disciplines actually do on a day-to-day basis when working in their professions, um, which sounds obvious to anyone outside the industry. Surely designing a building is all about collaboration and a mutual understanding of what people are doing. How they work together. It sounds obvious, and somehow on the way over the last decades as an industry, particularly in architecture, seem to have just created silos where individual disciplines don't really have isolated themselves, and there's a lack of connectivity between the roles. So we felt that we could essentially, could we create a new qualification which emphasized cross-disciplinary learning, um, heavy emphasis on learning in the workplace, to broaden opportunity and draw in young people who maybe couldn't afford some of the more traditional entry points into architecture. Particularly, could we pay salaries that were fair and reasonable to young people who needed to live and while learning. And through that conversation, we felt that we basically wanted to create a degree, a cross-disciplinary, work-based, rotational degree program, which provided an opportunity over 2 to 3 years for a young person to enter the built environment as a whole, and earn and learn at the same time in a way that they didn't end up being encumbered by debt. They were provided a useful supplement to the workforce within the individual businesses, and they learnt meaningful and relevant skills that are contemporary with what the needs of the industry are and the future needs of the industry. The other thing we found, and we obviously spoke to a lot of young people while we were going through this process of considering this option, and we realized that a lot of young people sometimes are, I wouldn't say misguided, but there's a lack of true understanding what individual professions mean or are by people who are either informing young people or young people are gathering from whatever's out there, their awareness of what the opportunities are. So you may have a young person who is adamant that they want to become an architect at the age of, say, 17 or 18. But maybe that's not really the role that they would enjoy most, and fits their role most appropriately. And vice versa, there might be somebody who thinks they want to be a contractor, but ends up having much more skill in managing design and designing in its own right. So our educational programs seem to put young people on the spot and demand that they make decisions on their career pathways at a very early age, where the infrastructure around them informing them about the industry is not really very consistent and always quite ignorant about the realities. So can we offer an opportunity for young people to enter the profession, learn in a meaningful way across the disciplines over not just a short, sharp program to tick a box and say somebody's gone through a 6-week apprenticeship, but a 3-year apprenticeship. That also provides employers with a talented pipeline of future talent. So that was the origin of the idea. We're talking around 2013 here. So you obviously we're talking about the 10-year anniversary of PlanBEE at the moment, which is great. but it in reality, it didn't really kick off until 2016. And I've been deliberately talking about a degree here because the vision was originally to have this as a degree program. However, we frustratingly um, had dialogue with a number of universities who just seemed to be unable to mobilize to help us develop this. And so Plan D, I wouldn't like to call it a compromise, but I suppose it was a compromise was to develop it as a level 4, level 5 higher apprenticeship, so pre-degree. And we did that by having a very constructive conversation with Gator College, who were very receptive to the idea and were willing to give it a go. And we framed it around initially around an HNC and HND qualification, which is basically a sort of generic uh, building and construction management, design construction management qualification. And that's how it initially started for probably the years 2016 to 2017, with a small group of employees in the Northeast. When the apprenticeship funding mechanism came in 2017-18, we found a way of aligning it with sorry if I'm going into a lot of detail here, some people may be very interested in this, but it's aligned with an apprenticeship standard, the level 4 construction design build technician standard. And what that did, because up to this point, the funding of the tuition fees had to be done by the employer, who were also funding the salaries of the apprentices. It was quite an expensive thing for the employers to commit to, but we all, when I say all of us, the 12 or so employers in the initial group were willing to take that step. So when the apprenticeship funding mechanism came in, that provided a way of funding the tuition fees through the apprenticeship levy, which took that burden slightly, which is a reasonable financial burden, away from the employer, and they were left with just the need to fund the salaries of the apprentices. So, so basically, Plan B got started in September 2016. Was the first cohort. I think there were around 12 apprentices, and we had a group of, as I say, 12 or so employers, including, and I can't list all of them, but we have companies such as Sir McAlpine, Cundles, Arabs, and Revolve, Ryder obviously is the sort of founding sponsor. It was important that it was a mixture of disciplines from the built environment sector. So architects, engineers, contractors, cost consultants, project managers, those type of core disciplines. And by having that group together, it meant that an apprentice would enter the program, do 4 months with, say, an architect, and then move to a contractor for 4 months, and then go to, say, a quantity surveyor, and then rotate to another business, say, a building services engineer, and say a structural engineer. So by the end of the compromise that I mentioned, the 4 to 5 level 4 to 5 program is actually a 2-year program, not a traditional 3-year program that you have in the degree. So that's how it's functioned really ever since. And so I've sort of given you a lot of information there, but maybe I don't know if
I think it's incredible the way you've taken that disciplinary approach and the way that your learners can move from one discipline to the next. That level of, as you say, understanding of different professions is really, I'm not aware of any other program that does this. Are you?
No, I know there are shared apprenticeships as a terminology where apprentices go from one business to another, but quite often that's just a limited 1 or 2 placements. We consciously made it a rotational, across a number of disciplines. It's interesting when we speak to new sponsors about joining the program. I think those who are receptive, which the majority are, to the idea, think it's great, but there are questions sometimes asked about, is 4 months long enough for the apprentice to get a good absorption into the business that they're working in, and B, for the employer to get value out of that apprentice in that 4-month period. And the answer is actually usually yes, because a lot of the success of Plan B is about the employers being involved in the selection process for the candidates or the apprentices entering the program. And it's very much not an elitist program. It's very much about providing opportunity to people who maybe couldn't afford traditional programs. But it is a very, very demanding program. There's a lot of work involved, and we need to make sure that we've got young people who are really committed to giving it a go. Because we know that, and, we've got to, so the selection process is very diligent, and employers are involved in it. It's a lot of it's about appetite, attitude, willingness to, the curiosity, a really willingness to get in there. And as a result of that, if you get the right candidates, they will get up to speed within a placement very, very quickly. And if you've got the right support infrastructure in the business, i.e., you've educated the sponsor to be ready, and it's not, oh, somebody's turning up on Monday, oh, we better get something for them to do. You need to be prepared to greet them and get them involved. If you can do those things, they will become productive very quickly. And we've got citations from employers who've said that quite quickly these people become indispensable. Or no, nobody's indispensable, but very valuable to the business.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. I was reading something like 98% success rate in your effectively your graduates from the PlanBEE program being able to take roles either within one or other of the sponsoring employers or elsewhere in the built environment. That achievement rate, that ability to retain that talent into the sector and get these people obviously on some amazing fast track career opportunities. Uh, that is remarkable, that level of achievement. What do you think the secret of success is?
I think it's that investment of time in by the employers and the apprentices in building those relationships over those placements. Um, and it's also the selection process, as I mentioned, which again, it's not based on um, financial viability. It's very much based on the people side and giving them these opportunities. But I think the reason for success is recognizing and nurturing that sort of a nascent emerging enthusiasm and talent through the 2-year program, so that when we get to the end of the 2 years, what happens in the structure of it is that the employers will essentially bid for it's not a competitive process. It will offer opportunities for the young people to join their business. So quite often we have an interesting situation where you might have an employment opportunity with Sir Robert McAlpine, with Ryder, with Cundall's, um, and other businesses who desperately want to recruit this particular person. And well, we introduced we introduced a sort of level playing field in terms of let's offer salaries within a specific band rather than one salary being over there and another one over being over there. And so it's interesting to see that these apprentices are so valued that there's quite fierce competition to recruit them because the employers recognize the value and the skills that have been acquired, and that one or two candidates have got into, say, the second or third placement and sort of thought, I've had a change of thought in mind. I want to go and do something else, and that accounts for probably that 2% who haven't made it. But I think it's about building those relationships and recognizing the real talent that's at the end. It's at the end of that capability. That's the end of that 2-year period.
Now, I'm very aware of within the sort of further and higher education sectors. I'm very aware of the challenges there are to ensure effective work placements and that connection between employers and learners and students and colleges, making that all work really well together. That's really difficult. And one of the things I do hear, I have to say, is the difficulty in getting that commitment from employers because as you say, it needs quite a lot of work. You have to be prepared. You have to think very carefully about how you're going to structure the development individual coming into your business in order to get the most from them. How do you manage that with the employers? I can imagine once they put the first round through, it's probably easy because they've seen the benefits and they're like, oh, hey, and we know what we're doing now. But when they're making that initial commitment and when you're taking a new employer through this process, um, do you have to do a lot of hand holding? How do you maintain that momentum and the right sort of structure?
I think obviously in the early months or the first year or so, we're a relatively small group, all based in the northeast of England. And so communication and making sure that everybody understood that the minimum standards, I suppose, of mentoring and care and structuring of a placement was all easily communicated and shared. As we've expanded the program to Manchester and London, it's been important. What we now have is essentially an induction process for new sponsor employers, and there are minimum standards that we expect of them in terms of behaviours. And every employer should have a mentor allocated, and that mentor is invited to attend a monthly meeting with a group of employers generally, and there's guidance on how to what to do during I suppose the induction of a new apprentice into their placements. So that happens every 4 months. Obviously, your other placements rotate. So that we've now got structures in place to onboard and connect and liaise with employers through that process, and feedback if there are any concerns or positives or negatives or whatever that are happening. Have sort of channels through which they can feedback performance and things like that. So the thing about this, and one of the things I wanted to sort of emphasize, is that the PlanBEE program has been predominantly employer led with a very, very helpful and engaged further education college alongside us, but it's very much been led by what employers can do for themselves. So we've sort of built this sort of ourselves and it works, and those structures I've explained have grown out of the evolution of the program. There's nothing to stop other sectors of industry following a similar template, and we're more than happy to share our experiences with rolling this out almost as a template program for the broader built environment as well as other sectors. And we've already had interest from people in the steel industry, for example, recently contacted us about could we do a PlanBEE program for them. There's already been a PlanBEE rail sector program piloted. So the approach, it's not rocket science, as they say. There's lots of experiences we can share, which I'm sharing with you now, I suppose. But it's the component parts are all there. It almost needs the will from employers and from, as I was learning providers, and also from government not to put barriers in, or particularly from government not to put barriers in the place to let this sort of thing flourish. And one of the things I wanted to come on to, if we get that of time, is the frustration that the government seems to be going backwards and almost trying to prevent the good work that's been done so far from being built upon. If I can just go, one of the things I wanted to just go back to, I deliberately, when describing PlanBEE, said that the original vision was for a degree program. And what we've been doing in the background as PlanBEE has progressed and flourished, I suppose, is to look at that degree aspect of PlanBEE. So for the last 2 years, we've been developing a level 6 degree, design construction management degree apprenticeship with a group of employers through the Skills England Trailblazer Group structure, which I was the chair during those initial stages. Now, frustratingly, that program was probably 95% approved before Skills England decided to do a sort of comprehensive review of apprenticeships, resulting in this sort of defunding of level 7 degree apprenticeships, and also question marks about the future of level 6 degree apprenticeships. So this program, which has had buy-in and authorship from a whole, a group of employers and learning providers following the Skills England rules, is now sat there on the back burner waiting to be approved so we can get on essentially for it to be the next evolution of PlanBEE. And we can't seem to get any sort of, you know, clarity on where next. In the meantime, we're looking at PlanBEE as it stands. It's fine. It's doing well. We want more of it. We want more employers to come to the party, as it were. We're now, looking at how other sectors could benefit from it. But the Skills England seems to be in a state of inertia. In some ways, possibly even going backwards, which is frustrating. When there's so much. We did some calculations the other day that we worked out that over that 10-year period, we spent, the employers involved PlanBEE probably spent £5 million of their own money. Obviously, we've been paying salaries of apprentices, but we've been and we've got a benefit from that, no doubt. The apprentices are great members of the team, to have with us. But there's a lot of private sector money got into that, and the levy, the funding of the tuition fees I mentioned earlier, is basically our money as well, our employers' money put in the levy pot and then taken back. So, I would far rather the government focus on programs like this, which we can prove has been successful, rather than funding short-term, quick fix, short programs to get to massage down statistics on youth unemployment. No, I don't know, maybe that sounds controversial, but I'm so frustrated that we know that this type of approach works. The private sector is prepared to put money in, providing there's some sort of reciprocal support there. And I think it's not just, I don't think it's just we as our practice frustrated with this. I think there's a general frustration at a lack of direction on this when we know there are solutions that could work. And I'm not saying that a cross-disciplinary rotational foundation degree apprenticeship is the panacea, but I do think it's a massive building block for the industry to excuse the pun, to build upon. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with architecture. ARV's doing some great work in restructuring architectural education. But this is not to say that the only solution is a cross-disciplinary starting point for education in the built environment. You can go in through traditional routes or blended cross-disciplinary degrees in other areas. But we know that it works, and we think we're frustrated as that we put all this effort into it and it's being ignored, I suppose.
The single degree route is no longer the guarantee of employment that it used to be. I saw a statistic the other day that 1 in 10 of NEETs, so sit not in employment, education
or training,
or training, that those 1 in 10 of them actually are university graduates. So the days when that single degree was your route through to employment, I don't think this is cut as it used to be. And what you've been able to do is offer these learners the opportunity to sample, multiple different related sectors that has a benefit in helping them decide what they want to be. And don't all struggle to know what we want to be when we grow up. I'm still working it out. But you've allowed them to find themselves. And at the same time, you've given them a background education in understanding how working with other disciplines in the built environment, it's so beneficial, and that instantly is going to improve the output of their work, the quality of their relationships going forward, their understanding of a construction design, construction management process. So that, there's so much learning, and also the employers probably of taking all sorts of insights from the learners who've just spent 4 months over here, now come to work with you and go, well, actually, that's interesting. They do this a different way. Have you thought about doing things differently? So there's so much learning that seems to be able to be shared. Um,
Exactly, yes.
and
There's actually, yeah,
well, I was going to say, and improve employment outcomes at the same time.
yes, exactly. There's actually an anecdote I was going to share about an apprentice who'd spent 4 months with a contractor who joined an architectural practice, and they were sat in a design review of a, I think it was, they were detailing some foundation details or a retaining wall detail or something like that. And they were saying, well, that's unbuildable. You know, I can tell you now that is not buildable. And they said, well, what do you know? I didn't say that, but they're more respectful of that. Said, how do you know that? Um, well, I've spent four months working on a building site with such and such a contractor, and I've done this. You know, many of the part one, part two architects around the table had never actually had that experience. Yet this apprentice, you know, who was, you know, ostensibly a level below them, had that experience to bring to that discussion. I mean, another story was this contractor, I think one of the Manchester sponsor employers, contacted the college one day, with the day that the apprentices were due to go and do their one-day academic study. He said, "Is there any chance you could excuse them tomorrow because I really need them to help run this, but some of the activities on site that day. I really value their input in this. Well, I know it's important they go to college tomorrow, but is there any chance that they can be excused?" So, you know, the apprentices learn so rapidly through this cross-disciplinary exposure that they actually become quite invaluable.
Mm. It's very exciting, very exciting. So I'm going to wrap up, if I may, by asking you, sort of knowing everything that you know now, with all the experience that you've been through in running this program, what tips, what advice would you offer to others who are looking at doing something similar, or to get the sort of outcomes that you've described? What learning would you pass on?
Um, I think it's about having a group of employers, or a group of employers who understand the value of this type of cross-disciplinary approach, and having a group of learning providers, because you know this won't work without a learning providers, by which I mean colleges and universities, um, who also buy into this approach. And it's about breaking down. It sounds like a cliche, but breaking down barriers between employers and those providers, so they have a mutual understanding of what each other needs, and how learners learn best and how young people learn best. I suppose the plea is to government. I mentioned this earlier, but the plea is to government to break down, but to stop what appear to be impediments to allowing this type of program to flourish. You know, just the frameworks and structures you know, the apprenticeship standards that have attract some, you know, government funding are already out there to support this. This isn't just a completely homemade qualification that we've had to design from the ground up. There is a lot of employer involvement in finessing the program to make sure it's relevant to their needs. But fundamentally, it's based on recognized educational standards, um, and it's stopping, I suppose, government agencies from navel gazing and trying to reinvent the wheel when a lot of these building blocks are already there. And you know, if there was some way of way of the government promoting a national, you know, template essentially that follows the Plan B principle, you know, nationally, it works extremely well on a regional basis. But at the same time, we have a network of regions that talk to each other. So it's two things at once. It's a very successful regional network, and it really works well in that way. But its greatest success could be even greater if it was, I suppose, a national network that follows the same principles. That at the same time talks, so employers, then providers within that network all talk to each other. Something like 60 employers, I think, involved in Plan B. Um, So we want them to talk to each other even more than they are at the moment. You know, so I think it's about those partnerships and finding the right like mind. And if people don't want to do it, fine, they can go off and do, you know, more traditional degrees. It's either you get it or you don't get it,
Yeah. Yes, of course. So, if I was an employer that was listening to this and this video and sort of interested in actually how this could support me and my business going forward, or if I was a college or a university looking to do something new to meet employers' needs locally, regionally, how do I go about finding out more about Plan B? Who do I talk to?
I think from our point of view as Ryder, we are interested in the evolution of PlanBEE, the next steps. In terms of the current program, as the nuts and bolts of it, it runs as a program which is led by Gateshead College. So the educational mechanisms and the financial aspects are run through their apprenticeship company. But what we're doing as Ryder as a practice is looking at hopefully the launch of that level 6 degree apprenticeship that I mentioned earlier. And in doing so, we're currently have a campaign with Building Magazine called Reinvention 2026, which is doing a lot of what I've been talking about during this discussion, to promote cross-disciplinary built environment education, rotational cross-disciplinary work-based education, and the next step beyond Plan B almost. So we have a campaign running with Building, which we recently published. The round table, which obviously Liz, you were involved in as well, and we'll be building on that campaign in the coming weeks and months. And there is a contact email within that if people want to get involved in that, joining us in really trying to press for more adoption of this approach. That's probably the place to look.
Mm. Excellent. Well, we'll make sure that in the show notes, as they call it, we will make sure that all the relevant contact details are there. Probably see if we can put a link to the roundtable discussion that we had with Building. I thought that was an excellent conversation with some brilliant perspectives. And actually, one of your Plan B graduates was as part of
That's
that.
right.
And he was very inspirational and incredible to see where his career has taken him as well. So we'll put all of that in the notes so people can follow up and explore a bit more. But in the meantime, all I've say is thank you. Thank you, Peter, so much for your time. Thank you for explaining more about Plan B, and all power to you. I hope it continues to go from strength to strength.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, Liz.